Hi there, my name is Taylor Ryan. I'm the founder and CEO of Layer 3 Ventures, Clint, and Growth Secrets. I'm a six-time startup founder with 15 years of digital marketing and growth hacking experience, as well as a ton of experience within startups. Originally, I'm from Washington, D.C., but I've been living in Copenhagen, Denmark for the last 7 years. I do a lot of work with Near Protocol on the Marketing DAO Council. A marketing DAO is basically a decentralized autonomous organization. I approve anywhere from $100 to $200,000 worth of marketing projects per month. So if you're interested, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I am the only Taylor Ryan in Denmark. If you want these slides, connect with me on LinkedIn. So long as we are not a direct competitor, I'm happy to help you out. Cool. So some of the things that I've done over my career, I've been responsible for the marketing departments of 4 startups that have exited, 1 IPO, 2 acquisitions, 1 merger. I've been running teams of anywhere from 50 to 30 people at a time. I've worked with a lot of accelerators and put in lots of bulletproof tech stacks. I am looking for investors and startups that want to get involved with Web3. So if you are interested in that space or want to get into it, don't hesitate to go to layer3ventures.com or check me out on LinkedIn. These are some of the organizations that I've worked with just over the last 3 years running my growth hacking and digital marketing agency, Clint. These are some of the accelerators that I work with on a very regular basis. If you do not see one in there that is looking for people to help out, I am always down to bring value, spread some knowledge. And Growth Secrets. If you go to growthsecrets.org, I have my online masterclass. It's 8 hours and it's just as fast as this. Tons of information. I'm constantly in the process of building up new things and trying to squeeze it in there. So hopefully there's value there for you. I do a lot of keynotes and workshops. So if you're interested in bringing me on board, I've tried to squeeze down everything from about an hour and 20 minutes into 30 minutes for you guys here today, but over 120 presentations over the last 4 years over a litany of topics. Hopefully this is valuable. If you haven't noticed already, I move really fast, like crazy fast. I've been told it's like drinking from a fire hose. I know this is recorded, and yes, you can have my slides if we are not a one-for-one direct competitor. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Taylor Ryan. I'm the only Taylor Ryan in all of Denmark. Cool. So before we start diving into some of the specifics, I wanted to hit some theoretical stuff to make sure everybody's on the same page. So the first thing is defining growth hacking. Everybody has their own terminology and how they define it. Growth hacking is doing the most with the least amount of time and money in order to get the biggest results. I never want to do a one-for-one approach. It's always a 1 for 50, 1 for 1,000, 1 for a million. It's a mixed blend of optimization and efficiency via testing, but the whole idea here is tools replace manual processes and trying to do more with less. This is what bootstrapping within startups is all about. This is what I go into a lot of different corporate companies to basically make happen because their processes and playbooks don't exist. So one of the biggest areas that I think if you're early in marketing or if you've been around for a while, you probably know marketing is all about systems. Every circle there represents a node that is interconnected with all the other areas of marketing. There's no island when it comes to marketing. So for me, it was content. I got super into writing, video production, you name it. And that led to getting to open up lots of different doors and learn a lot about SEO and digital ads and getting a lot more technical. So one of the pieces of advice that I try to give all early marketers is understanding that there is no island. Everything is interconnected. And the more that you learn within one specific area, the better you can apply that knowledge to different areas within marketing. This is going to be very system heavy because it's one of the most important things that I've brought not only into the companies that I've built out, but the companies I've worked with as clients under my agency, Clint. And it's thinking about everything as it breaks down into processes and systems. So imagine trying to make this stuff manually. So you have like popsicles, you have pasta, potato chips. If you were manually trying to make each one of these chips or desserts, whatever the case was, it would take forever. The process for building these out is pretty much the same, whether it's food or it's digital marketing playbooks. So first we want to define the outcome. What is it we want to happen? Then we work our way backwards. We have to collect all the assets, materials, or in this case, ingredients. We set up the steps, then we assemble, and then we test. And once we get the outcome that we're looking for, we automate. And this is something that can be really difficult for a lot of people, but it starts with decent project management. And project management is an acquired skill. Just like anything else, the first time that you go to do it, it's going to be uncomfortable, it might be clunky, and the people that do it really well make careers out of it. So just like any new skill, it's going to take time. You need to consistently follow the process, and it does get easier. And just thinking about processes and becoming more used to using them, think of it as forming a new habit. The average timeline for forming a new habit is anywhere from 18 to 254 days, which is absurd. But doing it with great regularity makes it stick. And if you look at the graphic on the bottom right, the question is like, how do we learn? And there's lots of different ways that you can learn, but 80% of learning is basically doing it in repetition until it becomes second nature. And one of the thought processes that I've seen and I can apply to my own background is it's much better to study 1 hour for 5 days than 5 hours all in one sitting. So if we are going to start talking about different tools, you'll notice that my processes use Google Drive. Everybody has their own mix and flavor. There's well over 8,000 different marketing tools out there. I've clung on to Google Drive. I found that there's a lower barrier to entry, especially when working with people that are less experienced. You choose whatever it is that you think makes the most sense for you. And from the standpoint of project management tools, there are tools that are kind of all-encompassing, but I often mix with Trello and Basecamp, sometimes Monday, depending on what the client has been using. The whole reason for doing this is there is sometimes a bigger barrier to entry if somebody has zero technical competencies. So the goal of all of this is to understand how to build your playbook library. Think of it as a knowledge center, in which case, like if you look at the graphic at the very bottom there, these are all the different content tasks that have templates, they have process guides, they have video guides, and each one of those has resources to go with them. That means I can apply these to every single project within content, within design, within SEO, within automation, within email marketing, within ads. If you can do that within your own business, you don't need an army of marketers. You only need people that can read the playbooks and follow directions. Now, there's always room for mixing and matching and changing the way that you've been building these things, but I want to encourage people to understand that this is building up your playbook library and knowledge center so you can instantly wrap up, reuse, rinse, repeat all of the different processes that take forever to really cement and build out. So I'm going to go over some of the brief resources that I'm going to give over to you guys. So the first one is a brief. So it's the project overview template. Every project needs a brief, and I'll go into this in detail. Then it's a resource sheet. And this is basically all projects require resources and all projects need a resource sheet. So therefore, you need something to attach to this so you can instantly navigate everything, but also be able to rinse and reuse these things. And this is, again, part of a much longer presentation and conversation. I got 30 minutes to drive some really powerful knowledge at you guys. But there's a whole category of things that go into this, whether it's the project management flow and the way that everything is structured and the way that you build Kanban charts, which is what these are, mixed with team management checklists, what have you. The most important thing that I'm going to go over here is the brief and the resource sheet, because that gives you enough ability to be able to continue to build off of all of these different projects. So why do we need a resource sheet or a brief to begin with? Well, what is a brief? So it's a fancy word for a detailed outline on a project level. Everybody has a different word for it. You can call it a master scope, an abstract, statement of work, overview, whatever you want to call it. You guys can read. Simply put, it's all the elements of the project, beginning, middle, and end. It's the roadmap, whatever you want to call it. Now, the old-fashioned way of working is bizarre to me because as I enter new companies, whether it's large, global, international, publicly traded organizations that you think have their stuff together, or it's small startups with just a handful of people that are really smart and working to solve one particular problem, most of the projects get completed in the same fashion. So leadership says it's important. Someone's asked to do it. The work starts. Everyone hopes that the work is going to get done. We cross our fingers, hope for a positive outcome. Eventually, the project is completed. The next project hits, and that's it. Why doesn't this work? Well, there's a million different reasons, but let's address it metaphorically. Let's say it's a multi-day road trip with your friends, and there's questions that you need to answer before you head off, right? And that would be like, what should we pack? How are we getting there? Who's coming? Who's driving? Which stops are we hitting along the way? And so on. These are really basic questions. We don't do that often within project management, which is bizarre to me when you're going to tackle a new project. So if you jumped in a car with these three friends, you had a destination but zero plan, what could possibly go wrong? And the answer is fairly obvious. So think about it. Everything breaks down to processes inside of systems. Let's say it's a social media post. If we're posting on LinkedIn, I immediately know the structure of the post. We have a hook, Then we go into creating mystery and benefit, 3 to 5 benefits that are basically around what the purpose of this blog post is, adding in some emotion or why it matters, then a thank you or tagging of certain people, and then a strong call to action. And that is consistently how we are building these out on LinkedIn. Now, there's different ways to do it across different social media platforms. That's just one example. Another thing that I have to be very clear about, because sometimes people immediately get uncomfortable, like, I don't like change. I don't want to do this. It seems like overcomplicating work. There's a big difference between a simple task and complex projects. Simple tasks are like reviewing of somebody's blog post or sending out an email or follow-ups, whatever the case is. If it's really complex project work, you really do need to assemble all the parts well in advance and plan things out. And just trying to hit the ground running as fast as you can to complete stuff is the worst way in order to actually get to something that is close to like a real deliverable. The other thing that I constantly preach about, especially in front of my team, is the 2-minute rule. So I always encourage people never to put off the task that takes less than 2 minutes to complete. Once it's done, it's off your plate. I do this. So if I'm looking through different in things in my inbox and I realize like, wow, it's going to take me less time to send this off and it's off of my brain and I don't need to think about it anymore, it's so important to do that. Cool. So I'm not going to go into super deep detail. There are tons of different types of project management. This is more important just to state so that people are like, oh, but what about? And it's like, yeah, I know. In a lot of different marketing departments, you have a blend version of Agile, Scrum, and Waterfall. It really depends on the nature of what you're building, whether or not there's web development in the mix, and how you're organizing your sprints. I'm not covering these in deep detail. There's no need or reason to, but just know that there's an organized fashion for all project management work. And if you do not have that as part of your team, then we need to jam out. I am happy to talk, but I'm not going to go into that. Cool. So creating a project brief. I think that makes the most sense to nail down. This is what should be prepared before you execute on every single project. So you're not starting from absolute zero. This is also theoretical, but bear with me. So there is always going to be a structure and a process and a breakdown to everything. And these are just a handful of the different projects. Let's just say within Web3, that's the space that I'm in right now. If you are able to find existing frameworks, then you don't have to sit there and create from absolute zero. And I encourage you to avoid doing that. So I always ask before I start building something, or some of my team members do, where does this exist in the wild? Where can I go out and find the perfect version of the final thing that I'm trying to build? And in many cases, it exists in lots of other places, like your competitors or in a guide somewhere online. This is part of the concept of isostatic adjustment, which is there is no such thing as a square planet or a 3D version of a triangular planet. The reason that planets are spherical is because it takes up the least amount of mass needed in order to form a shape. And that means for you, what is the least complicated version of what I'm trying to build in order to execute it and get positive results? And then, of course, you can optimize later, but the thought process is do not try to invent everything from scratch. Find the version that you're trying to build where it exists in the wild and you know it works. Cool. When I'm trying to use a brief template, I'm just trying to maintain consistency on the formatting. I'm trying to make sure that I have input within every section. I'm working my way through it to not leave anything out. And by the way, this is linked within the slides. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, you get it. Most projects are repeatable, and I'll show examples of that, but we can reuse them. So you don't necessarily need to feel like you're doing busy work. So within the project management scope of this thing, we have the beginning, which is basically the project name, super clear. You don't need to give it a fancy name, 3 to 6 words. A project overview or summary. This can be complete sentences if you really want to, that's fine. The goal usually is bullet points, and then eventual outcomes or strategic outcomes or ultimate outcomes. If I am a early stage or sole contributor type of marketer that doesn't necessarily see the big picture of things, this is where you tell them this is the why behind the why. The eventual outcomes is here's the whole reason that you're putting in all your time, effort, and energy into this one singular project. Cool. So now we need to build out a resource sheet for this project. And that means the resources, the URLs for them, the notes to describe what that is, and then logins and URLs. That normally sticks right there in the first top area, basically, yeah, row 1. I lock those fields, and then I fill out everything after that. These are often segmented by group resources, and then I cluster related projects. So if people are like, I don't know where this exists or what this looks like, cool, I got you, related projects. It really helps to do it this way, and I encourage you to examine doing this when I am doing hundreds of projects over the span of a year. I am able to rinse, reuse, repeat because I've built out my system this way. So filling in the resource sheet, you need your title, you need a link to the resources and description. The reason we're putting in so much information is because 75% of marketers' work is repetitive, which means we can repeatedly use these templates. And I like to insert inspiration, either a playbook that I found online or a competitor that's done it, as I mentioned before, something on the internet, YouTube videos. It requires sometimes some creativity to go out building out the steps of this particular project. So give people or give yourself enough time to find the different resources to either mimic or gain inspiration from. Then this is kind of the arduous part of the journey, which is building out the individual steps. This allows you to figure out where things went wrong, where things stopped working, potentially what you need to do better on the next one. But this step-by-step approach really allows you to rinse and reuse these templates. So each project will have tasks, each task will have steps, and you just need to follow the steps. And in many cases, I add in the login and password to make it absolutely idiot-proof. If you have some form of security within a larger organization, that might not be possible, but either way, I try to make it as clear and concise as possible. I'll tend to label each of these. I tend to use bullet points. If you can add screenshots, great. I always link the different resources or work files in there. And of course, I mentioned the inspiration and do's and don'ts is super important as well. This is what screenshots look like. It really helps people. I promise it does, especially when I'm handing things over to either clients or new people that have joined the team or whatever the case is. Short review on deliverables. I can't tell you how many times it happens with a lot of people that are early or I guess less skilled. But the idea of like, cool, I completed the project. It's like, all right, well, who's reviewing it and where did it go? And it's like, you didn't tell me that was like the next part. And it's like, okay, cool. So these need to go somewhere. So who will review it? What are the final steps before delivery? Or is it ongoing? What is the format? All that stuff. The final deliverables of every project need to be super clear, and that often is either we're publishing or scheduling, or if it's an ongoing project, we basically rinse and repeat, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the case is, and you're tasking individual people so you have people responsible for these types of projects. And lastly, I try to kind of build out this checklist at the beginning, but I'll also re-update it at the end to make sure that I have all of the different tasks that need to be completed on an ongoing basis, not only for the future, but also to just know in the future, like, hey, if I have to redo a project like this, I have everything and it's there. You can do this inside of Trello. You can do this inside of the project brief. So I don't love decision trees. Some people do. Some people are ecstatic about them. I've built tons of decision trees. If you want to take a look at mine, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will give you a link here, and it takes you to a very long decision tree of how you go about building a brief and what you need to put into it. But man, it's, it is somewhat arduous to get through it, but it's so worth it. So I've covered a lot of stuff. Why is this not obvious? And I have kind of a metaphor to explain it. So there's story time. There's this tribe out in Australia, and I'm going to butcher the name, Cook Theory. I don't know. They're a community, and they're known as the Internal Compass tribe. And they have a superpower that basically is every person in that tribe knows cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, at all times. Even the children can do it, which is pretty baffling, right? And so they could test this ability. They blindfold these tribe members, put them in a dark room, spin them around, and they still managed to point out north, south, east, west with the absolute ease. And so there was an anthropologist, Lyra Burdowski. That was a good attempt at it. She went to actually live among them and figure it out. So after a few weeks, she was about to give up. She spoke with all kinds of people. She was asking directions, and they would just point. And suddenly she noticed an extra window, like a video game. So she shyly asked the experience of the extra window as she was trying to navigate through this world that she was asking people. And they responded, well, of course, how else would you do it? We all have the extra window. And so it was one of those funny things where it relates to the psychology principle of body schema. Technology just becomes an extension of ourselves. So the race car driver feels the car. The painters don't see the brush. Carpenters no longer notice the hammer. When was the last time, and I can't speak for everybody, but you're looking at every single key that you're typing? It's probably not like that. So if we look at briefs, resources, and templates, this is an extension of you. Projects become clear, steps become obvious, assemblies easier. Work becomes a methodical system, and once again, how else would you do it? This makes things so much easier, and consistently every project looks and feels like it. So you know where to find everything and you know how to go about hitting everything. This is growth hacking. This is doing the most with the least amount of time, effort, and energy and resources to get the biggest results. Tools are replacing processes. We're never doing this one for one, and we're optimized for efficiency. So let's quickly go into how to build a resource sheet. I'm aware of time and I'm trying to keep it tight as possible. So a resource sheet contains all relevant documents, assets, resources, the templates you use, the logins and passwords for all projects. Now again, depending on the way that you organize your company, people are like, oh, we can't put logins and passwords. Fine, I'm not going to argue with you. The benefits are easier navigation, much better overviews, and it's just an overall massive time saver. So to make it even easier, I start with kind of the core documents when I use Google Drive. It's the main folder, project brief, the resource sheet, and the Trello card, all linked within the first section of my resource sheet. Again, resource sheets are a part of every single project that we do. That way you don't have to go looking for stuff. That way you don't have to manage to try to figure out who has what document. It's all linked within one singular sheet. Moving on. All projects have the same fields. So when you're building a consistent resource sheet and you want to be able to move it over to different projects, you need the same fields. So that's the name or the type of resource, which is inside of those brackets, the URL, notes, login and password, and that's about it, honestly. And so within that, I'll actually end up putting in all the different things that I need, whether it's assets, the other templates that I'll be using, different lists that I need to pull or scrape. You name it, I've done it with different projects. And again, this is across Web 2, Web 3, SaaS, B2C, B2B. It's really easy to transfer all these things and get up to speed so fast. And I often get asked, like, do we need a resource section for this project? Yes, I promise it does make things easier. And it goes back to that isostatic adjustment and also the theory of this tribe out in Australia. Well, how else would you do it? You can find everything. It makes things so much easier. So quickly, I know that every project has different fields. So yes, when you are building a project that requires multiple templates with multiple different fields, you have to be able to adjust to that. So if we've already done this previously, then we can rinse and reuse a lot of the materials. So I don't want to double up my work. So what I've done is basically make sure that I am linking to the new templates inside of my resource sheet, and I'm continuing to build these multi-step projects in different ways and different sheets, and then adding them to kind of the master resource sheet. So an example of this, like influencer marketing. One of the longest and most challenging elements of marketing that I've been a part of for quite some time, because there's a lot of moving parts. So there's a unique set of fields that you can see there on the left. There's a lot of benefits that obviously are clear processes, consistency of data across all the different influencers, and it's easily able to compare the different entities and entries that are in there, and you do this for speed. Now, I often scrape a lot of different influencers or grab lists and pull them and aggregate them out of different places, but I place them on similar sheets whenever I'm doing influencer marketing. If I'm doing shill posting or publishing across channels or PR, whatever you want to call it, that means I need these specific fields for being able to reach out to people. That's how that's played. Cool. Why do I use templates? Why would I ever need to do this? For speed. So I'm able to collect and retain valuable info that's all consistently and reliably there. I also can repurpose and reuse it for later, and I'm able to navigate the project really easily and duplicate or reduce duplication of efforts. It's allowing me to get another degree of organization. I have an internal knowledge base and knowledge center that I've created. It also allows me to accurately forecast how long it's going to take based off of the other briefs and projects that I've completed, because all the information is there. So really briefly, I'm adding resources to templates. So this is an example of a template. You can see the little box there at the bottom right. So it's the last tab on every sheet that I create. And I'm adding navigational links into that. I'm adding project briefs and tutorials. I'm adding other templates that I've created in the past that are relevant for this project. I'm adding assets and files. I'm adding examples and inspiration. I'm adding all the resources and assets that I would ever need in order to complete this project into the sheet. And then I'm labeling within brackets what those exactly stand for. Folder, doc, sheet, PDF, sheet, video, URL. You get the idea. The whole concept here is now I have everything I need in order to consistently rinse and reuse these different resource sheets for all kinds of different projects. It allows for such an advanced level of overview. So why do we need this? Like, why is this even relevant within growth hacking? Let me explain. So, story time. There's so many bullshit creativity tests out there that are useless, but they're often used to decide whether or not marketers like us get jobs. And so they give you a creativity assessment and they say, this is one example, what are all the use cases for a brick in 2 minutes? Where it's like, is that really a test of my creativity, or is this just wasting everybody's time? I digress. So one of the ideas that I consistently preach about is using all parts of the buffalo. Now, it's not a very common mannerism out in Europe, but the idea is getting to use all the elements of what you've already spent time and effort and energy doing. So let's say, for example, I have a list of free social media groups. What can I do with these free social media groups where anybody can post things? Well, I could export it and potentially use that as a blog post. I could potentially export the most engaged material and use that as inspiration to create blog posts that I know will have more engagement. I can create a blog post out of it, which would be web content. I can create social media posts explaining the process or the most interesting groups out of the bunch. I could turn these into lead magnets, downloadables, where I basically say, download this list, and now I have your email address. I can post in each group, multiple, whatever the case is. There's an endless amount of things that I can do with that. Every project is like that. Some of the things that I really want people to take away from this is most shit marketers only know a few moves. So this is the difference between a multi-step marketer versus somebody that understands the entire system. Exceptional marketers know advanced moves. So we're talking all these steps in order to get to an ultimate result. The real experts, the real amazing marketers that are a 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 100,000 types, are the types that understand how to automate, systematize, and reuse their moves. It's flawless. And if you can do this stuff, you have a job forever. So I wish I had more time. I'm basically out of time. There are so many different projects that require multiple steps. I wish I could show all the examples, but again, like, this is part of every marketer's job, is as you get more advanced, you realize you can pull in lots of these different templates that you've already created. And examples would be shill posting. It's a frame of reference within Web3, which basically is almost like spamming, but whatever. So I grabbed aged accounts. I collect a lot of groups for posting. I then shill post using or create a template for shill posting. Then I add visuals. Then I post on shill groups. Then I promote the latest post in the communities of the company that I'm working with, whatever the case is. Final thoughts. Promise I'll keep this tight. So why do we need extra steps? I'm sure many marketers are looking at this being like, I can't. The only takeaway you need from this presentation is I need to build briefs and I need consistent resource sections that look the same that I can rinse and reuse. Most people want to continue to work the same way that they've always been working and aren't interested in finishing or doing things differently because they have found the least amount of work needed in order to complete a project. This does require a little bit of upfront work, but the value is so much better at the end. It does take longer, but it's worth it. This isn't micromanagement. This is something completely different. As I said before, you get cleaner processes. All of these are reusable. Ultimately, you have either happier clients or happier like bosses or leaders at the very top. These things make things so much easier. I can't even go into that much detail about it, unfortunately, because I only have this amount of time. So that being said, remember, this is an acquired skill. New skills definitely take time to get there. Follow the processes, use existing templates, and please add in extra notes whenever you're building stuff along the way. It helps all of us get better as marketers. I'm out of time. Thank you so much for sitting through this presentation. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you want the slides, connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Taylor Ryan. I run Layer 3 Ventures, Clint, and Growth Secrets. I'm a 6-time startup founder. I think I know my stuff. 15 years of marketing experience. Check out growthsecrets.org. And last but not least, I do a ton of workshops. I hope this was valuable. If you're interested in bringing me in to run a workshop with your company or your team, I'm always happy to oblige. Thank you so much, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.